goes away. 'Cause cover girls don't cry after the face is made. But there's
Hi, everyone. We're going to get started in just another few seconds. Hi, I'm Tiffany Pham, founder and CEO of Mogul, and we are so excited to have you all here tonight. It is especially really heartwarming to get a chance to meet so many of our incredible Mogul users that I've known through the platform for so many years now, and to get to meet a few of you tonight has just been so incredible. Tonight is a really important night. Tonight, we are going to get to learn more about cryptocurrency and the action steps that you can take to become a part of this conversation and movement today. And this is important, especially because right now, only 4 to 6% of cryptocurrency investors are women. And as we know, in the early days of an industry, that's when fortunes are made. And when those fortunes are made, that determines the big winners, who then determine what to work on next, what to invest next in, and that ultimately then launches a cascade of consequences for women thereafter. So here at Mogul, we're really trying to ensure that the opposite happens here. As you know, our mission at Mogul is to enable women all around the world through information access, economic opportunity, and education. And to ensure that the trend, the recurring trend that we see today, whereby industries are constantly affected and having this continuous decrease of women participating in the industry, from women in tech to women in entertainment to women in cryptocurrency now potentially, that does not occur here. So tonight, we are hosting this event to prevent this trend from occurring, to ensure that women remain at the forefront of this conversation and movement, and that therefore women are helping to shape the future of this industry. So tonight, we are therefore live streaming this event to audiences globally. This event reached audiences and interest from over 80,000 people. And so the select few that were selected for tonight to be able to attend in person, congratulations. And this will actually also be available on demand. We'll actually have an incredible female founder, Kelsey Cole, first presenting a one-on-one session, really explaining the details of cryptocurrency. And then that will be followed by a panel of industry leaders sharing their incredible insights and their work across the industry, moderated by our very own Ali Mullen. And so now, without much further ado, please help me welcome Kelsey Cole.
Hi, everyone. Mogul has become the #1 destination online for career-driven female millennials. So it was no surprise when the mogul herself, Miss Tiffany Pham, took note of a serious problem that we have in our world today. As she mentioned, only 4 to 6% of participants in the blockchain and cryptocurrency economy are female. The virality of Tiffany's posts weren't just her speaking up, but it was her taking action, which is why we're all here tonight. And so I'm very thrilled to be presenting to you Crypto 101. This is just a little overview that gives you a kind of a bit of a tiptoe into crypto, which that is not me who made that saying up. I just want to give you basic 101. So I'm going to take you through what Bitcoin is, what blockchain is, but not how to buy it, what to buy it, or when to buy it, because I am not a financial advisor. We'll get to that after. For $6 billion was raised last year in ICOs. 879 ICOs raised $6 billion without giving up a single slice of equity. But already in 2018, over $5 billion has been raised by over 500 ICOs, and we just finished the first quarter. So why does this matter to you? Because you need to be participating in this economy. Male, female, whoever you are, you need to understand the basics of what Bitcoin, crypto, and blockchain truly is. So like I said, this is a disclaimer, this is not financial advice. Nothing I am telling you here tonight is my own recommendation to you on what you should purchase or how you should spend or save or invest your money. I'm simply here to give you an educational overview, so nobody here from Mogul or myself is providing you any sort of financial advisory. And just to make it super clear, this is Leo playing a financial advisor. He is not a financial advisor, and neither am I. This is more like me. I became this little girl on Wall Street facing the bull a number of years ago. I'm the daughter of a stockbroker, who was actually totally screwed over by Merrill Lynch. So I was born, this vendetta was born in me when I was about 10 years old, and I'm very excited to be part of the revolution that's taking Wall Street down, or at least giving them a run for their money. This is me. I'm going to be your crypto professor for the evening. You can find me pretty much everywhere online at the Kelsey Cole, not because I think I'm important, just because there's a lot of people with the same name as me. I am Canadian. I am a co-founder of a cryptocurrency blockchain startup that is revolutionizing the advertising and publishing industry using blockchain and artificial intelligence to fight digital ad fraud, which you may or may not know is swallowing up 56% of every website visit with robots and fake clicks, and eating up billions of dollars a year of advertisers from mom and pop shops all the way to big corporations. I came from the cosmetics industry, so this building is not strange to me. It feels like home, but I'm excited to be bringing women into the sphere because I'm a very passionate supporter of women's products and everything around that sphere. And I came from a communications background, so after leaving Revlon, where I led PR in Canada, I had my own communications agency, which I just recently exited to AdBank. And I'm also really into crypto for good. I believe the reason that I'm in this industry is to make an impact socially, not just economically. And I believe that part of that is sort of powering this revolution of females within crypto. So without further ado, let's get into Bitcoin. What is Bitcoin? Bitcoin, by definition, is a digital currency in which encryption techniques are used to regulate the generation of units of currency and verify the transfer of funds, operating independently of a central bank. So that means that nobody actually owns Bitcoin. There's no institution that owns it. There's a finite amount, so you can think of it kind of like digital gold. You can never print more of it or make more. But in order to truly understand what Bitcoin is, we have to understand why Bitcoin exists. Does everybody remember 2008? It's been a decade. Something happened. We all seem to have our blinders on. These glasses were also very popular that year. And I blame the douchebaggery of the aughts for us not realizing what was happening. We had a little bit of a global meltdown. And that's actually what inspired Bitcoin. Satoshi Nakamoto, who is the anonymous inventor of Bitcoin, realized that we were doing something like printing money. Essentially, when we ran out of bills, we just go to the mint and print more. And the problem with that is it changes rates of inflation, and it causes essentially a global meltdown, which is what we've seen the aftermath of for the last 10 years. Satoshi Nakamoto published a white paper in October of 2008 addressing these problems. This is a highly, highly important document in the entire revolution of cryptocurrency, and I recommend that everybody takes a few minutes to check it out. If you want to get really deep, get into the Book of Satoshi for the theory behind it, but check out his white paper, check it out. And what makes Bitcoin so special? You know, what is it about this that is so interesting that's caused this absolute wave of interest from, you know, tech geeks to financial moguls, and now the masses? Well, first of all, Bitcoin is unhackable, totally unhackable. What does that mean? Well, it's kind of like trying to take chicken nuggets and turn them back into a chicken, which is insane. You would need a magic wand. Bitcoin is the same. It's decentralized, which means it's broken up into all kinds of little pieces, and it's made up of nodes. Nodes, you can see in this diagram, we've got a central node here on this side. That's like a bank, right? The system is in the middle. It operates everything. If the bank gets hacked, everything comes down. Bitcoin is decentralized, so the nodes are spread out. So when you hear Bitcoin mining, which we're going to get into next, it's basically people that are activating these different nodes. So they have to solve very complex mathematical problems, which is what Bitcoin mining actually is, in order to create a Bitcoin to issue it. So every time it's traded or spent, it has to be verified by all of these nodes. So it is unhackable. This diagram shows you very quickly centralized versus decentralized. Centralized, obviously, things like exchanges, banks. It's not anonymous, and you can hack it and downturn the entire server, which there's some really fun cases of that happening in Eastern Europe over the last year, where they actually shut the whole country down with a couple of hackers. Decentralized allows for users to control the funds and the flow of money. It's totally anonymous, and there's no hacks or server downtime. This is kind of an example of what it looks like. You see there's a lot of different nodes at work instead of just one. P2P, does everybody remember what that means? Well, if I show you this, you will. Remember these Macs? We used to do things on them like Go and Kazaa and LimeWire. This was peer-to-peer. So if you remember, if you're like me, I'm going to be 30 this year. God save me. This is how we used to download music illegally in the early 2000s. It was peer-to-peer sharing. And essentially what you would do is you'd go on and you'd see how many seeds. The more seeds and the less active downloads was the faster you were going to get your 50-cent track. And you would look for those seeds. All of those seeds were different people who were uploading that file source so you could download it. So peer-to-peer works in a similar way. Decentralization and peer-to-peer technology are connecting people together instead of just coming from one central source, which would have taken hours for me to download into Club. So Kazaa, LimeWire, and Napster have really shaped the future for how a lot of millennials are thinking about cryptocurrencies and remembering the good old days when we could just source music for free and not have to pay Spotify $9.99 a month. But mining is how other people are getting into cryptocurrency. Did anybody see the Big Bang Theory episode where they were talking about Bitcoin mining and they lost their computer? I think it really revolutionized the way the world thought about this term, because previously we thought of miners as looking like this, but not quite. Bitcoin mining looks a little bit more like this. Mining is using complex, like I said, mathematical problems to be able to mine these cryptocurrencies, and big mining operations look something like this. They take a lot of electricity. There's been a lot of buzz and a lot of controversy over mines because of the amount of electricity they use, but they can generate absolute massive amounts of wealth, whether it's for individuals or big companies like Bitfury, for instance. Blockchain. Blockchain is the technology that Bitcoin is based on. So in order to truly understand Bitcoin, you need to understand the blockchain, at least a little bit. The blockchain is, so if millennial pink is the new black, blockchain is the new internet. This is kind of what you get when you try to type in blockchain to visualize it. It's kind of like trying to visualize the internet. This is not what blockchain actually looks like. I just thought it would be, a funny way to show you guys how confused the entire world is, because it's kind of like when we started talking about the internet in 1996, and where we're at in terms of blockchain technology is kind of like the internet in 1998. What is blockchain? Well, instead of me fully trying to explain it to you, I'm going to give you a little dose, and I highly encourage you to go and watch this video. It's by far the best explanation I've ever seen, and in 7 minutes it will make you 7 years smarter. It's by the Center of International Governance for Innovation, which is also Canadian, and they have a beautiful video on what blockchain is. But essentially it's two premises, which I've mentioned. It's the technology that powers Bitcoin, and it's decentralized, which means it's a suite of distributed ledgers. You'll hear that a lot. Bitcoin is a suite of distributed ledgers. What does that mean? Well, ledgers, we know from accounting, are where we score and keep track of things. But this ledger, because it's distributed in our peer-to-peer network and our decentralized system, allows us to be able to understand and power this technology with true records that cannot be hacked or changed. So if you make a change to the blockchain, it adds a new block. It doesn't erase anything. There's no such thing as an eraser or a hackable component of the blockchain, which is why it makes it so transparent, so accurate, and so trusted by everybody, instead of having to trust, the government. So in real life, let's talk about real use cases of blockchain. With that, maybe I could start with my own. Advertising is a beautiful way to look at how we can solve problems within the blockchain. It's a very broken industry, and I know a lot of you, whether you consume content or you create content here in the Hearst building, you know that we have a serious crisis for content creators on our hands. It's been an absolute media bloodbath over the past few years, and we're losing revenue left, right, and center. People are fighting the idea of ads, and advertisers are fighting the idea of spending any more money, not just in print and in television, but in digital. They're getting sick and tired of being frauded. You can learn more about it with this crazy video on our website. Why is there a centaur? You're going to have to go and see to find out. But essentially, we have a problem in the advertising industry. There's a great big fat cat that's sitting in the middle of publishers and advertisers, the content creators who are actually bringing you value, the advertisers who are actually powering that content. Right now, there's a middleman who's taking up to 90% cut of every transaction. In addition to taking that cut, 56% of every single website traffic after that is a robot. A robot, if you can imagine. So if you're spending $10, only 44 cents of that entire $10 is actually getting through to your ad campaign. So companies like Procter & Gamble and people like Mark Pritchard, who's their chief brand officer, who's in charge of spending $7 billion a year, is sick and tired of it, which is why we need a blockchain solution. AdBank, the company that I co-founded, provides transparency using the blockchain, and we have a cryptocurrency that is powered by the artificial intelligence system within the blockchain. Why do we need a cryptocurrency? Because it gives us full transparent knowledge of where that currency is being. If I go to the store and buy a slice of pizza and the pizza man then goes to buy flowers for his girlfriend, I don't know what happens with that money afterwards. But if it stays within an economy and an ecosystem, then I can see the full flow of money, which is why we created the AdBank token. Another great use case is supply chain. We're all sick and tired of things falling off the back of a truck. Supply chain is one of the ways that people and companies can lose the most money because, especially with shipping from other countries, you don't know where things go, how things go. If you think about the beauty and fashion industry, there's so many different components. And as consumers, we're starting to get a little bit more aware of not just where things come from, but how they're made, and that can be tracked with blockchain. This just kind of shows you a little bit of how crazy a supply chain could be. Imagine if you had a full, transparent, visible ledger that's accessible 24/7 via digital technology. That is blockchain and supply chain. The next one is music and IP. There's a very brilliant music industry. Shall I call her a celebrity, an innovator, or perhaps just an inspiration? But a woman named Imogen Heap. Again, if you came of age in the early 2000s, you'll know of Imogen and all of her work on the OC. But she's also produced for Taylor Swift. She wrote Harry Potter's score, and she's the only woman to win a Grammy for sound engineering, which is so Mogul. Imogen is the founder of a company called Mycelium. They aim to put music on the blockchain so artists actually get paid for their work. What's really challenging and hard for us to imagine is all of the components that go into becoming an artist. She's actually put that into something called a creative passport, and you can actually manage your schedules, change the percentage of how people are getting paid out of each track, make sure people are getting properly credited, and obviously make your money faster, because a huge problem with artists, not just not paying for their IP, is the length of time it takes to make their money. Just ask 50 Cent. So because of all these technologies and blockchain, there are thousands of cryptocurrencies popping up. Where are they all coming from? Well, there's a little unicorn called Ethereum. Again, that was based and built out of Canada by an amazing fellow named Vitalik Buterin. Some say Buterin. I like Buterin better. I'm going to go with that. Vitalik had this idea. He realized Bitcoin was amazing, but what was more amazing was the technology Bitcoin was based on. What else could it be used towards? If not just for finance, what other applications could it have? He came up with a very simple, clear, crisp concept. If this, then that. It's called a smart contract. And a smart contract is essentially an agreement that both parties enter, which is how all business should be done, but it's not, as we all know. The funds are released as soon as everyone agrees to the terms. And so if I'm the buyer, I'm putting my funds into escrow in many cases, and when the sellers actually finish the services, it gets automatically released to them. No tracking down payments, messy POs, all of that, terrible invoice nonsense. If this, then that. If you agreed to this, then you do that. And what it's done is created, well, a celebrity out of Vitalik who's got the coolest t-shirts ever, but I digress. It's created Ethereum, which in its simplest form is a decentralized app for decentralized apps. Why would you want to have a decentralized app? Well, it's the same reason you want to have a decentralized financial institution. It pulls the control away from one company and puts the power back in the hands of the people, which is really the concept of Ethereum. Now, it's really funny that a lot of people think when you're typing D-app for decentralized app, it's a spelling mistake, but it's not. It's referring to Ethereum and Ether. which is what powers decentralized apps, or DApps as we just called them. Ether, like Bitcoin, is a digital currency, but instead of operating like a traditional digital currency, it actually helps to provide fuel, or what we call ether gas, towards powering these networks and these decentralized apps. Which then brings us to altcoins. So altcoins are essentially anything, a cryptocurrency that is not a Bitcoin. So even Ethereum is technically an altcoin. Altcoin is a very popular term you'll hear throughout the industry to describe literally anything and everything, just like this Dogecoin on the left, which is a real coin, unlike Kanye West on the right. What is a token versus a coin? We're talking about these altcoins. Sometimes you hear people refer to them as tokens, as I did with the AdBank token versus a coin like Bitcoin. Very simple. Tokens are built on the Ethereum network, and blockchain is a coin, Bitcoin is a coin because it has its own blockchain. So any coin that has its own blockchain is a coin and not a token. There are thousands of altcoins in existence because of something called an ICO. ICOs, or what I was talking about earlier when I gave you those crazy stats about billions of dollars being raised without any slice of equity getting given up. And it's caused a little bit of a stir, controversially, as well as, this sort of craze of everybody running to the gold rush. It's a mix between an IPO and online crowdfunding for cryptocurrency, and it's created a lot of amazing projects and a lot of problems. So you'll see there's the good and the bad of ICOs. We had a successful ICO that raised $15 million US in a 6-week time period, which is, if you think of traditional investing and seed rounds, totally unheard of. But these days, it's getting a little bit more common. Telegram, for instance, just raised $1.5 billion with their ICO, the largest in history, and Lottery.com is about to launch an ICO for $5 billion, $3 billion of which is actually going to get donated to solve world hunger. ICOs and cryptocurrencies are all on sale right now. I don't know if you've heard, but we're kind of in the worst bear market. Like, not just a bear market, we're talking about like cryptocurrency is the seal that's just been mutilated by a polar bear, which means it's amazing time to get in if you're curious, because for me, it looks like it's all up from here. But again, I am not a financial advisor. ICOs, just back to this concept for one quick second, are very high risk and very high reward. They've also created a little bit of a culture of what I like to call Lambros. They call Lambo, 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 because they're gonna all go buy goddamn Lamborghinis. Give me a break. They say win Lambo, I say win Kia. So why should you care? All this hullabaloo about blockchain and Bitcoin, it sounds a little bit ridiculous, doesn't it? Well, we're in the midst of a revolution. I feel like cryptocurrency is a little bit like flower power in the 1960s that totally revolutionized the way we looked at how we interact in the world. We've just brought power back to the people. There's cryptocurrencies and projects like one called Cool Cousin, for instance, out of Israel that already has 500,000 active users, and after they finish their ICO, they're turning it over to the community. So no longer are they going to be approving and going through the strenuous process of managing the community. The community will start to manage itself. And that's what you see in crypto. When you start to engage and join these different channels, you see that it's truly people taking over. You've got people like me who don't have to go to traditional VCs and experience the kind of sexism or marginalization as a female that's a co-founder. You get to go out to the community and really push hard with your idea and raise a lot of money in a short period of time. It's really giving people like Wall Street a run for their money. If you've ever questioned the legitimacy of what's happening on Wall Street, or in government, or in corporations that help to decimate the world economy, we talked about those blinders from 2008. These guys may have been partially the responsibility. You need to look into blockchain, because right now there's a new world, and yes, Vitalik is just so much fun, isn't he, on so many levels. There's a bright new horizon, but the problem is somebody's missing. I say it's time for more female in blockchain, because blockchain, to me, has a lot of feminine qualities. It's all about collaboration, transparency, openness, bringing wealth creation and abundance to a lot of people who had no access to it before. But where are the women? Well, Tiffany brought up a very good point. When this article came out, she's not the only person that stood up and said, literally, what the F? What is going on? This is absolutely crazy. And they reference in this article an event that happened in Miami, which I was at, called BTC Miami, that actually had strippers at the opening party, which was very interesting to try to do deal flow as a female when there are fellow females hanging from the ceiling with everything out and money everywhere, and everybody's all, take profits and enjoy life. And I'm like, I just got to get out of this strip club because this is not how we do business, and we need to get more women in so these kinds of things aren't happening anymore. Feels a little bit like this right now, to be honest with you, especially being one of the few females in this space. I feel a little bit like we're rah, 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 and the men don't want to listen because they're over there just having their party. And I was actually told at BTC Miami by a man that it was not my place to speak out about this issue. That if I dared to speak out, I would be witch hunted by the blockchain community. But you know what I say, boys? Bring it on, because we're coming for you. There is a beautiful rainbow. And at the end of the rainbow is a pot of gold. And it is not just for the boys. So how do you get in? I'm going to tell you how to get involved. I'm not going to tell you, again, what to buy, when to buy, where to buy. You can do that research on your own, and I'm going to provide some really excellent resources. We're going to put them up on the Mogul website, and you can read and you can research and you can do what feels right for you, because that's what cryptocurrency is all about. It's about you. There's so many options, though. Where do you begin? Well, you could crypto into tiptoe, which I must credit Dylan Sparts for that. Can't get it out of my head. Step one, you got to set up a wallet. It's really easy. It's so easy, in fact, there's a woman here who works in blockchain who was at a networking event. And she just happened to be chatting to a founder who asked her if she'd gotten involved in cryptocurrency yet. And she said no, she was interested. And he said, well, why don't you do it right now? And he pulled out her phone, and he downloaded a wallet, and he made her make her first crypto purchase. And now she just completed a successful ICO for $50 million and is helping to bring females into the revolution by being the cryptocurrency company that has the most female employees that I know of in the space. So congratulations to Celsius. But she set up a wallet and literally changed her life by stepping into the community. So that's step one, set up your wallet. Step two, you got to protect that damn wallet. Don't do what I do with CryptoKitties, where I bought all these CryptoKitties, and then I forgot my passcode, and I learned my lesson. Let me tell you, there are 90 of them floating around somewhere, and I could have been a Wen Lambo by now. Write down your private key. Don't just write down your private key, store it in a fireproof safe. You might think I'm crazy. I might be a little crazy, but I'm telling you, this is a super, super key point. You cannot keep it somewhere digitally. It could be hacked and may be hacked, and if you start to have enough cryptocurrency, it will be hacked. I've had 3 friends in the last week, 2 of them billionaires, that were just victims of hacking. They were able to recover because they're technologists and they worked almost as quickly as the hackers, but it's happening, it's real, and it's not even being covered as much as you think it should be. So put your private key into a safe. And now it's time to participate. Step 1, 2, and 3 are complete. You've got your wallet, you've written down your private key, which is a selection of words. You could try to memorize it too, but if you lose it, you lose everything. You can ask people who that's happened to. And you've put it in a fireproof safe, because if your house burns down, you'll still have your private key. Now it's time to participate. So just like Vitalik and his little unicorn baby, you decide what comes next. So read anything and everything. Read the Book of Satoshi if you want to get into the theoretical. Read white papers. I suggest you start with Bitcoin white paper and work your way through. If you're thinking of contributing to any project, read their white paper. Understand what these people are all about. Read articles. This is a fantastic, fantastic compilation of the who's who in crypto. Forbes just did a fantastic piece of coverage. I'm sorry to report most of these guys are no longer billionaires after March's market, but these articles are fantastic, and there's a lot of amazing coverage, especially from financial institutions like Forbes. Blogs. Read blogs. There's all kinds of them. Make sure that you're looking at who it is that's writing them, and be sure. Watch anything and everything. This guy's amazing. He has a program called Block Geeks, and he teaches you the basics. He'll even show you how to set up a wallet, buy your first Bitcoin. He's fantastic. Watch anything and everything. Oh not everything though. Be careful of the BitConnect YouTube videos. BitConnect was a huge scam that happened in the fall, and everybody was a BitConnect YouTuber. I highly suggest that you do not watch those. And listen, if you're into podcasts, there's some really, really great ones out. Laura Shin, who is one of the most important crypto experts we have on the planet, just left Forbes because she's gotten so popular in crypto. She was able to start her own podcast called Unchained. It's fantastic. Talk. Once you've read, you've watched, you've listened, you need to get into the community and participate because, like I said before, this industry is all about community. You can join many different forums. Telegram is the most popular in the space. Telegram's a messaging app. Kind of think of it a little bit as Slack. You can join in communities, and they're active 24/7 because crypto markets never close. So you can always find someone to talk to, whether you want to get positive or negative. You'll find a little bit of all of it in Telegram. There's some amazing Facebook groups. This one's the best. It's called Crypto Coin Trader. If you're a lady like me, Crypto Coin Trader Women's Group is a fantastic resource for tiptoeing into crypto without being judged. And play. Get yourself a crypto kitty or 4. You know, these guys are a fantastic little game that's a visualization of smart contracts. They made a lot of noise a few months ago because they actually blew up the Ethereum network, which just goes to show you blockchain is like internet in 1998 right now. We need to work on getting more developers into the system to make it better, faster, stronger. But this game allows you to understand and really get the hang of smart contracts. I met these kids at a hackathon, and I literally stayed up all night trading kitties, and that's how I finally understood smart contracts. If it worked for me, it'll work for you. The other way to play is to join a bounty program. You actually get paid to participate in communities by sharing out information. You can attend a meetup like these guys who went viral at Christmas because they're making money and you're not, and you can meet fantastic people like them. Or you can watch people speak. This is Bill Tai. Go online and watch his talks. He's like the first person that ever tweeted about Bitcoin and was the guy that got me into the space. They call him the Yoda of blockchain. And finally, last but not least, the moment you've all been waiting for, buy. We are in the midst of a digital renaissance. Renaissance represented the creation of paper. Paper was how we share math, science, history, literature, art, music. Blockchain's going to do what the digital renaissance did. What the renaissance did for paper, blockchain will do for the world. Like I said, you'll remember me saying, if millennial, pink is the new black, blockchain is the new internet. You need to participate. If you do not get into this economy, I'm telling you, you will regret it in a few years, maybe for the rest of your life. All you have to do is tiptoe into crypto. I did, and it completely changed my life. Thanks.
Work. Hello, testing. Awesome. Cool. Hi guys, my name's Allie Mullen and I work at Mogul. I'm a marketing manager here and I will be moderating this panel as these chairs come out. But thank you guys so much for coming to this event and also everyone else that's tuning in on live stream. We're so excited. We could probably just move them a little closer together. But we are going to start a panel, some amazing experts in this industry, continuing this conversation, this education about cryptocurrency, blockchains, ICOs, and even more. So we want everyone here to walk away knowing exactly what to do, with starting a wallet, possibly even getting involved, joining a project, maybe even leading an ICO. So we're going to continue this conversation, and I'm going to introduce each of our panelists as the next few chairs come up. So first we have Fenny Wang, who is a US qualified securities lawyer turned entrepreneur in the blockchain space. She's currently leading legal operations and strategy at the IXO Foundation, which has been referred to as a blockchain-based response to the UN's call for a data revolution. Next, we have Ron Quaranta, who has over 27 years of experience in the financial services and technology industries. He's currently the chairman of the Wall Street Blockchain Alliance, which is currently leading the nonprofit trade association promoting the adoption of blockchain technology across global markets. Its mission is to stand as a neutral, unbiased steward of education and cooperation between Wall Street firms. Next, we have Sandra Rowe, who's currently the managing partner, co-founder, and chief operating officer of the UWIN Corporation, standing for Unleashing Wealth in Nations. But she was also very recently appointed the CEO of the Global Blockchain Business Council, where she'll be advising companies and governments as they adopt blockchain solutions and explore the implications of this technology. And finally, we have Amanda Gutterman, who's the Chief Marketing Officer of Consensus, a big Ethereum company. So it's a global formation of technologists and entrepreneurs building the Ethereum ecosystem. She is also the creator of event series like Ethereal and a contributor of The Information, where she writes a column on blockchain technology. So help me welcome these amazing panelists. Yeah, that would be good.
Should we sit under?
Yeah. Cool.
Sure. Okay. Oh no, I have to be
In the middle?
Yeah, there we go. Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for being here. We are so excited to continue this conversation, especially with such an incredible panel. So I'd love to start off by just hearing a quick 1 to 2 minute story of how you guys each got involved in this. You know, it's only about 10 years old up until this point. It's still new. So how did you guys all get involved?
So I spent a lot of my life trying to be a square peg in a round hole, realizing that I'm not really a corporate person after all. So I kind of left big law back in 2016. I was exploring blockchain and so forth and trying to find different ways to get into space. But I think oftentimes life has really strange paths of getting you where you want to be. So I was at a wedding in Philly, and one of my roommates at the wedding runs this Toastmasters program. If you guys don't know Toastmasters, they do like, you know, public speaking and so forth. And she's like, you know, there's one of my members runs a Toastmasters prison program. She's like, did you know that there's a federal prison in downtown Manhattan next to the Brooklyn Bridge? She's like, and there's this really famous guy that's part of this prison Toastmasters program. I was like, who's this famous dude? You know, she's like, have you heard of Silk Road? I was like, yeah, you know, I think I read an article about Silk Road. It was like drugs and Bitcoin. She's like Dread Pyre Roberts. And I was like, oh, that's cool. Like, I want to meet this guy. So I was like, all right, I'm going to go into prison, right? Like, you have to fill out a background form. Like, it's kind of hard to get into prison. So I got into prison. And so I met Ross Ulbricht. I met his mom and met one of his friends, Tatiana Moroz, who's a Bitcoin podcaster in the space. So, I mean, for me, it was very, very interesting to kind of hear that perspective. Because I don't come from a libertarian sort of bent. So it's kind of nice to be able to engage with that kind of dialogue, you know, what his philosophy was, what his thinking was around Silk Road and Bitcoin and so forth. And then Tatiana invited me to this event that was back in May of 2017. She said, if you want to meet more crypto people, come to this event. So it was like, okay, it was like a fancy private members club. It's like, are you sure I'm allowed to go? So I get there, and the first person there is my founder, Sean's. And the next thing I know, I'm off to South Africa, and I'm talking to UNICEF about blockchain and tokens and ICOs. And you very quickly go down this rabbit hole. And so it's been a pretty amazing journey since I've been in this space, and I'm grateful for all the amazing people I've met in this space, and just very, very, very smart people who challenge me in different ways. So I'm really glad I'm here.
Yeah. Same. Brad?
So I have a way more boring story about how I got involved. I've, as you mentioned earlier, I've been in financial markets for 27 years, which kind of freaks me out. I've been in the blockchain space for about 5+. And it started when I got a phone call from a colleague who was working at an institutional investment firm. And he called me on his cell phone, clearly with his hand over the cell phone, clearly worried. And he said, Ron, I need your help. So, like, and I've said this often, for anyone who's in financial markets, that's arguably the worst way to start a conversation. So I couldn't resist, and I said, what's the matter? And he said, well, I've got a fund customer that wants me to invest in something called Bitcoin, but I think it's illegal, and I really don't want to go to jail for any of this. And ever since then, I've been going down the rabbit hole of getting involved around what we broadly now call crypto assets, really the underlying fundamental technology that blockchain represents. And what I often say is the reinvention of how we do what we do across not just financial markets, across literally the entirety of the economic system that we operate in. And right now I'm very privileged to serve as chairman of the board of the Wall Street Blockchain Alliance.
Awesome.
I'm going to use a mic because I didn't get mic'd up, so there you go. Sorry. I started my career actually on the London version of Wall Street. So I was on the trading floors of Deutsche Bank and Morgan Stanley. And so I come from a trading background in foreign exchange and interest rates. And back in 2012, a couple of my buddies were like, hey, you should read this white paper. It's kind of cool. It's called Bitcoin. Like, all right, so I did. And I have to admit, I didn't quite get it the first time around. Then I read it again. It's like, wait a minute, crap. And then there is an aha moment a lot of people get, which is like, at least for me in financial services, I was like, holy crap, if this actually works, then foreign exchange markets, the way they operate today, almost all the intermediaries you just don't need anymore. And that is pretty big on just a number of different levels. So I started experimenting, just like kind of shooting in the dark in a lot of ways. I met up with people. I kind of like tried to figure out who was developing this stuff. And I'd go to a lot of dodgy meetups in the early days and end up in weird pubs in London, but it was cool. Then end up in Berlin, hanging out with some Ethereum people. But over time, the experimenting turned into having your own crypto network, turned into people becoming your friends and also business partners. And I was at CME Group at the time, which is the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, which essentially is the largest derivatives exchange out there. And because of the role that I had there, we were actually able to launch Bitcoin futures product. First, we launched the pricing index pricing products, and then a year later, the futures products were launched. And it was really important from my standpoint that a large organization like CME Group, and Fidelity's done the same, and a few other big institutions have done the same, which is step up and say, look, guys, this is real. It's not going away. It's been around for a number of years. It's got basically the profile of a new asset class. And I think big organizations, giving credibility to that also helps with sort of the recognition that this is early days. There's a lot more to come to this space. And I think any of you who may be just starting, it's not too late. There's a lot going on right now. I personally think 2018 is the trough of crypto at the moment when you look at the price action. It can get worse, definitely. But I think there's a lot of opportunity here. And it's not just about Bitcoin anymore.
I got mic'd. Thanks, Sandra.
I was the only oddball, sorry.
I've had the honor of knowing Sandra for almost 2 years now, which is the amount of time that I've been in the space. When she was at CME, was a big part of helping launch the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance, which Consensus, the company I work for, was also involved in launching, which is now the world's largest Ethereum industry group. My background, I'm Chief Marketing Officer at Consensus, I think, yes. I had a digital media company called Slant, and before that I worked at the Huffington Post. And my interest in this space really came from the software side and from a very specific solution to a very specific problem. I'd been in college when Bitcoin came out. I knew what it was. I bought like one or two. Wish I had bought more, probably. But I knew what it was. I didn't have the aha moment. I didn't get into it. I ignored it. And then I had this digital media company where we were allowing users to submit content, and then we would allow them to monetize that content on the platform by serving ads across it and giving the user a share of the revenue they brought in, basically teaching our users how to do content marketing. A lot of our users were college students, journalism school students, and because digital ad rates are the way they are, we were splitting the dollar, we were splitting the cent, and we were paying a lot to third-party providers to handle the transactions. And when I learned about Ethereum, my mind just popped because the idea that I could bring all of those transactions down to zero or near zero cost and make them settle so incredibly quickly, even if they were very micro transactions, was so exciting because it meant that all of these different business models in the media space that hadn't been possible before, but that actually makes sense logically, were suddenly viable. And the same is true in so many other verticals, like remittances is similar, and there are many other models that feel like that. And so when I had the opportunity to join Consensus and meet with a bunch of folks who were building out this Ethereum ecosystem, Joe Lubin and a bunch of other really awesome blockchain luminaries, I jumped at the chance to help market and tell the story of how these things work.
Awesome. So I want to ask a question. You guys, most of you guys touched on, meeting in jail. I'm not sure if it's legal, a few dodgy meetings. How safe is this? What would you guys tell the audience, who are unsure of getting involved? We mentioned it wasn't hackable, but, some people are ending up in jail. What would you say to the audience about this?
Well, when I first started playing with this, I didn't know such a thing called private keys. So I was like, oh, it's an app, and if you delete the app, you can still get your stuff back if I remember my password. So I think that was like kind of lesson number one, is that this is a little bit different. So it's kind of like the responsibility is on you. You own these assets. It's not a traditional bank where they hold your assets. So even just finding out, okay, so what is my private keys? Oh, these 12 words, okay, you got to write them down somewhere. So like going through that learning process, I think it will be a little bit of challenge as the industry figures out how to make that UX design better. But you approach it also with a different kind of, I think, attitude than someone else is taking care of my money. Like, okay, I'm taking care of my own money. A lot of the hacks that you see, those happen at centralized exchanges. So in that sense, there's nothing blockchain about it because they are your traditional centralized operation, even though they're in the crypto space, but their actual operations have no security properties of blockchain. They pool people's digital assets all in one honeypot, and then they get hacked. So that's what you have to be aware about. So most of the, as a retail person, probably you're going to interact with these centralized type exchanges, such as Coinbase or Kraken. Hopefully they'll have good enough security measures because they're in the spotlight. But you can also manage things using your own wallets that's completely local to your device and your phone. So do be aware of protecting your own assets and understanding what a private key is, how to find it, how to protect it.
Yeah, is it safe? I guess the not simple answer is it depends. If you're comfortable, to Tiffany's point, with controlling your own private key and maintaining your own security, and it's that decentralized aspect of you controlling, we heard about that earlier, your value. And if you are, then great, good luck. But if you lose your private key, your asset is gone, never to return. And to your point earlier, that's why one of the first stand-up organizations that really popped up when Bitcoin and crypto assets came up were exchanges, which, if you kind of think about it, philosophically differs from the reason for Bitcoin. Why do we need centralization? Why do we need these exchanges? And the answer is because it wasn't easy to get, and it wasn't easy to price, and it wasn't easy to get access to, and it wasn't easy to understand. And let me preface that none of this is investment advice ever, at all. I made the mistake of offering a price prediction on Bitcoin, and someone tweeted it out a couple of years ago, and the board went ballistic. But I think it's worth experimenting. I think it's worth getting into. I think it's worth realizing that how you create value and wealth is evolving, and crypto assets are part of that. You can't miss that opportunity.
So I'm going to frame it, I'm going to answer the question a slightly different way. So I'm hoping it will make sense to you all. So today and the future is data. Today and the future is about data being more than information. It is actually now value. So when you digitize anything, it now has value. It can be treated like money or value or a medium of exchange. In that world, it becomes increasingly important, like blockchain technology. Why? Because those are the rails that will help move that data along in a much more efficient and cool way. And we're at the beginning of this road. So think of it not as I'm going to buy some tokens because I'm going to get rich. Think of it as I'm looking at this technology of the future. Well, it's happening now, actually, and in the future. And it's an investment in what is evolving as infrastructure layer technology that is literally going to transform processes for us that we haven't even thought about yet. And those are all the applications that will go on top. Think about the smartphone. The smartphone arrived, 12 years ago? 20, was it 20 years ago? I don't remember. Anyway, the phone was around for a while, but apps only came in like a decade ago. Your world went pop when apps exploded. My point is we're not even there yet. I call it, we're in the ugly duckling phase. There's a lot of cool stuff going on, but we're still at the beginning of solving for some critical, basic problems at the infrastructure layer, like scalability, confidentiality, privacy. There's a whole bunch of stuff that our technologists and developers around the world, our peers, are working on that, that will get solved, but it's just not there yet. And once it does, the stuff that comes on top, watch out. It's going to be amazing. That's why you go into crypto right now, not because you're just going to get rich quick, because that may not happen.
Yeah, totally agree with that. For sure. So is blockchain safe? I would never say that it was unhackable, but I think it's a lot harder to hack. The barrier to entry to hacking it is just a lot higher. Sometimes I compare it to robbing a house versus robbing a village, which I actually stole from another amazing woman in crypto, Jamie Smith from Bitfury. And I was on a podcast with her, Laura Shin's podcast, and she said that, and I told her that I'd steal it, and now I'm stealing it, but also attributing it. So I feel like it's fair.
Not stealing.
So not stealing. But when you have a centralized system, the most normal manifestation of that is some kind of perimeter security, some kind of firewall. And if you're able to hack through that, then you get access to a big honeypot of data. And that's what you see with like the Yahoo hack. That's what you see with the Equifax hack. And you have not seen that with blockchains, because with the decentralized structure, you would have to basically rob every single home in the village to have the same kind of impact as those hacks had. So you raise the threshold a lot for things going wrong. And the real question, if you flip it around, is it secure to have anything in anything but a blockchain? And if we're going to live in a world where all of the data about us is collected and stored somewhere, which we are going to, we are already moving toward that. Right now we're spraying all this data about ourselves in all these different corners of the internet. We don't control any of it. But if we're going to live in a world where we're going to make an accurate representation of all of our data, our identity, our business property, our business processes, in a digital form, the only acceptable way to store that information is on a blockchain. Otherwise, everyone isn't secure.
I want to get back to that ugly duckling phase. So we're still so early on. What are the kinds of ways that people, whether they're in marketing, finance, design, how can they get involved in projects, start having those seats at the table in this industry that they, haven't been involved in so far?
Yeah, so I think a lot of what's really interesting about this technology is it's not just the computer science, but it's really rethinking, for me at least, it's behavioral economics. And also monetary economics. So if you have that kind of background, or you have a predisposition to study that kind of subject matter, that's really, really valuable in this space, on top of just being a coder or developer or someone who's in computer science. And I think that's also what's really exciting for me about the space. I mean, technology is only one part. The engineering is only one part. There's lots of difficult and interesting computer science problems around scalability of blockchains and so forth. But the real magic is in the social engineering. And so I think this is where tokens in particular play a unique role apart from the blockchain itself as an audit trail or as an immutable ledger. So when you think about token economics, and I think Kelsey mentioned a little bit in her talk about the role of her token within their ecosystem. So it's about using a digital asset within a closed ecosystem to incentivize certain kinds of behaviors so that all the parties to that ecosystem benefit. and you reduce your costs, but everyone somehow benefits. We improve the production curve for everyone, right? So I think that's a really, really fascinating and novel aspect that's developing in this space that maybe people haven't talked about as much. So I think if you can study that, it's incredibly valuable in this space. And just now, people with a finance background are trying to come in and figure out, well, how do we value these tokens? How do we value these assets? What's the fair value? How should they trade? Blah, 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 and all this stuff. So they're kind of formalizing and professionalizing the trading and the valuation of these assets, and they will become real financial assets, and they will also make capital markets completely all digital and tokenized. So if you have that kind of background, I think that's incredibly valuable.
Yeah, one of the themes I always hit on is this idea of education. Right? There's a lot happening, and a lot is happening really fast. And to Kelsey's presentation earlier, there's a lot of information to review and continually update yourself on how to understand what it is blockchain is meant to accomplish, how you understand what crypto assets fundamentally represent. And for the record, we believe that they're the emergence of a new asset class. And get involved. I think it was part of the conversation really is about there's so much you can do depending on what you do. If you're into code, so much of this is open source, just do it. Get involved in it. I mean, there are so many groups, and not shady groups that are meeting in basements someplace anymore, but certainly groups where you can talk about things like use cases, talk about reinventing specific types of industries, talking about, again, that phrase I always use, how do we do what we do? So look at your business and ask yourself, how does this business operate? What's it meant to accomplish? How will that evolve in a blockchain world? Because blockchain only becomes successful when we start answering those questions.
So I largely agree with everything that's been said. I will emphasize one thing, that this tech is pretty amazing in its democratization element. There's actually a culture here that I hope you've recognized or are recognizing, which is it's about people empowerment. It's about responsibility and accountability for yourself, and that you can get involved because the stuff, as Juan said, is open access, open source. Doesn't matter how young or how old or educated or not educated. There's actually a place for pretty much everyone in this because it's evolving globally. It doesn't respect borders. It doesn't care where you came from. What it does care about is whether you're going to contribute meaningfully to a network or a set of networks. You just have to find your spot. And I know it might sound overwhelming, but my view is just start talking to people who are in the space and start somewhere, because we need marketers. We need, I was just at a conference this morning of chief communications officers, and we were literally discussing the fact that the storytelling element of blockchain and crypto has been terrible because unfortunately, bless them, but our developers came up with a lot of the taxonomy and words that we use today, and it's just awful, and it's confusing, and it's just, well, we know. So we need help with that, and I think there's a role for anyone who wants to take a bit of time, connect with people, and just start slow and then go from there. I don't see it as any magic bullet. There's no course you take or no degree you have to get. If anything, it's better for you not to get a degree. Just get in, get stuck in.
I love what Sandra said about contributing meaningfully to a network. I think that's what it's all about. I think even this conversation has focused a little bit on the aspiration to launch a token or to do an ICO, when really the aspiration behind that is the desire to build something and to build software and to build a product that actually contributes to the ecosystem and contributes value to users. And if you are building serious technology, you're going to need a team. And that team's going to need to have designers, marketers. It needs a director of HR. It needs a head of community. Our global head of community, Conwal, is right here. It needs all kinds of different people to make it work, the same way that any other software outfit would need all kinds of different people. So imagining that blockchain is just for people that are, super enterprise focused or super finance focused or developers just isn't accurate. It's a technology company, and it needs to have all the people that are required to make that work. And we're super focused on the software side. we're not really focused on the price and the crypto part as much, though we do generate some tokens. So if you're looking for a job in the space, just go to consensus.net. We're hiring lots of people.
Awesome.
Can I just add one thing to
Yeah.
that? One thing that the tokens or crypto has done, it actually has, and there was an allusion to 6 billion and 5 billion raised. It has brought a tremendous amount of resources to a very new tech, meaning there are now people with some serious financial resources putting money into companies, putting money into networks, spawning additional networks and more blockchains. The point being the innovation is now fueled with a lot of backing and money, or value, I should say. And that's a good thing. In the last year alone, the number of companies that have just blossomed is amazing. And so there's opportunity everywhere you look. You just have to start looking. And you'll quickly find that there's pretty much hiring everywhere in this space.
And off of that, I know Kelsey mentioned a lot of amazing resources. As experts in the space, what are the top resources that you would recommend to go for? Whether, podcasts, reading, certain people to follow on Twitter. What are the best ways to educate, since we're all learning about this?
So I really like epicenter.tv. If you really want to get into the nuts and bolts and understand some of the technical issues and also the range of the token economics issues, but also because they're my friends and they're really good guys and they want more women to be in this space. They're always looking for ways to bring more women on the show as well. If you're very interested in the investing side and the finance side of the space, there's a couple of particular podcasts I would recommend listening to. One is with I think Multicoin, so they're a crypto hedge fund. So they kind of talk about their theses and ideas and how they think about valuation. Ari Paul of Block Tower is another good one. So he's a little bit more, I think, bullish on Bitcoin. Some of the Multicoin guys are a little less bullish, so you can kind of get both of those flavors. Polychain is a good one, so understanding what protocol tokens are. So that was very helpful for me in understanding the space and what the economics are and why it's actually something different than traditional equity fundraising. And the other one is Crypto Assets. So it's a book by Chris Berniski. Yeah, Berniski. So I think that one's also very helpful in thinking through crypto assets as a financial asset class. So I would recommend those.
Yeah, so I agree with you, and a lot of us know Chris well. I think the Crypto Assets book that he and Jack Tatar published is one of the really good ones. I think Truth Machine just came out, which is really worth the read. Laura Shin's podcast has been mentioned. It really doesn't get much better from the perspective of that. And these are all people you can follow through social media as well. If you want to go through a bit contrarian and follow someone who's interesting and has an unusual obsession with marmots, you can follow Preston Byrne. Just strap in, have a coffee, and hang on, because it'll be some really interesting reading. And I think some of the starting sources online, so I think CoinDesk does a really good job of publishing news and information. I think some of the alliance organizations, so we're partners with EEA, and I think they're beginning to really show at an enterprise level some really amazing stuff as well.
A couple names that come to mind. On YouTube, Andreas Antonopoulos has some amazing YouTube videos. He's probably one of the earliest Bitcoiners I know who is not only a technologist, but he speaks plain English and actually can communicate to the average person, which I find actually really difficult skill set to be of both and do it well. So Andreas Antonopoulos, you should check him out on YouTube. He's also got a couple books out, Internet of Money, and he actually wrote the technical book on mastering Bitcoin, 1 and 2 apparently. So he's a great one. And then when I think about Twitter, as much as you may loathe or like Twitter, the amount of, if you follow the right group of people, the amount of stuff that gets aired publicly, and I mean like technical debates, personal dislikes and likes between people who are actually on the cutting edge of this stuff, it's sometimes a bit much, but if you can cut through some of the melodrama, you actually get information at rapid speed. So I do recommend Twitter, even if you're not a fan.
And also Reddit. The community is really active on our Ethereum, our ETH Trader. And I can't believe I got through all 3 of you cleanly without one of you saying Nat Popper, and I get to say Nat Popper. Isn't that great? I thought one of
We
you would
saved that
take
for
it. So digital gold.
Yeah.
It was written before Ethereum really became a thing, so it just is the dawn of Bitcoin. But it's great. It's totally narrative. It's a human-centered story about the origins of Bitcoin, which is not a sentence to be said very often. A couple more journalists to follow. Bob Hackett at Fortune. Fortune has The Ledger, which is great, which is their publication around blockchain and crypto. Matthew Leasing at Bloomberg is really good covering the space. Laura's amazing. There are a few more journalists that once you find someone that you think covers the space in a way that you understand, just keep on coming back, and you can have that person tell you the story over time.
Oh, and one more, I forgot. If you go to Medium, and there's just the whole cryptocurrency section, I mean, there's some great thinkers and writers in the space who are actively publishing, so follow them. There's some good stuff there. And also, they've got lists of resources as well, of reading and videos and whatnot.
We have a blog called Consensus Media. We have some great content on there, too.
Perfect. So you guys are going to be ready to go, very informed, and ready to start investing. One final question before we open it up for Q&A. Sandra, I know that you brought this up previously, and this is a Women in Crypto event. We recognize the lack of women in this space, but how do we change the conversation from the lack of women, the conference was, so awful, to, getting people, both men and women, in the hiring, investing, educating women, so the numbers eventually speak for themselves?
Yeah, no, it's a challenge. I do actually question the 4 to 6% because, frankly, I don't think there's a good way to get empirical evidence that actually backs a real number. But let's go with the 4 to 6% because New York Times apparently published that. But my view is we need to just hire, invest, and the women in this space as well as the men need to make sure that we are actively bringing in more people who are supportive. I mean, let's be supportive of each other is what I say. And so I'll give you one example of concrete things that have been done. There was a group of women who got together in Brooklyn a couple months ago, the Collective Future, and it's a group of us, there's only I think 13 or 14 of us, who basically have different spheres of influence in the space. Some are VC fund investors, some are crypto investors, some are starting their own startups, are co-founders, et cetera, et cetera. And we've decided collectively to pledge certain things. And I've made a couple pledges, a couple of the other women have made pledges. And these are things that are actionable, right? Now we're being held accountable to do these things. And one thing that's been really good that we've done almost immediately is hire interns, who are women, but also hiring men as well. This is not about just women, but it's about let's get good people in, right? Let's just keep getting good people in. But also we've helped each other out with all the complaints that we've heard about panels, not having women on panels. Like, I'm tired of it. I don't want to hear this anymore. Like, just get women on panels. And that means help each other out. And so when I hear about an event, I automatically ask, is there another spot? Let me see the list. Who are they? And if there's not another woman on there, I actively ask for one now. Or if I can't make something, then I go out to that group and say, hey guys, who's available on this date at this place? You just have to be actionable about it. And my view is like that's one thing, at least in my spot, I'm willing to say I'm doing. The collective of us need to all do that, I think, or encourage it at least.
I agree that events are a really big deal. And from my vantage point, running Ethereal, which is one of the largest events in the Ethereum space, the fact that the event itself is organized by a group of women has led somehow to branding and content that ends up attracting women. So without really trying, we end up attracting an audience of 30 to 40% women. And this year, Ethereal's on May 11th through 12th. If you want to come, the first day of it is all women speakers. And we're not making a big fuss over that or announcing it or doing anything to trumpet that other than me saying it right now, which I guess is that. But there are really great women in the space. There are more than enough to fill a panel. There are more than enough to fill a whole day. And if you do some actual research, you can find them.
And I will say, Ethereal is amazing, so you guys should go.
So as the sole male on this stage, let me start by mentioning I did not go to the BTC Media event in Florida, and I never ever will. If for no other reason than my wife sitting in the audience would probably kill me. I think one of the conversations we often have in this space is that level of diversity and inclusion needs to be part of the genetic makeup of whatever you're starting. So looking at our organization, the Wall Street Blockchain Alliance, for our next board meeting, almost 50% of our board will be women. One of the more important team members that we brought on board was our chief diversity officer, really focusing on across all of not just the board, but our working groups and our membership around what are those targets, what are those goals, what does engagement mean, and what does it look like? I agree with you. I think the number, that 4 to 6 number, is probably different, higher. And there's a lot of really talented, smart women that are really shaping the foundation of where this industry is going to go across multiple industries. And it's not just a financial markets conversation. I'm kind of biased just coming out of that world, and you and I know that world really, really well, but we're talking healthcare, supply chain, digital media, how we do, again, what we do is changing. And so you need to have that level of diversity, part of the genetic makeup of whatever you start. And that's when you start to drive real change.
I think it's really important to have different viewpoints and life experiences in it, because at those different kind of political viewpoints, that's also the reason why there's such rancor on Twitter, because it's so political. Like Bitcoin was born out of a particular type of ideology, and for me, that is actually why I was really turned off by it for a while, because I was like, I don't identify with these values. These like cyberpunk boys, I have a lot more street cred than they do. Like I'm a freaking immigrant. I was born in post-Mao's China, and my family, went to re-education camps. So please don't talk to me about freedom. Like I know what that means, but that doesn't mean I can't care about institutions in my relationship with other people in society, and I'm not just out here for myself. So that kind of really turned me off. I was like, well, how do I support something that seems against my values? And that space has opened up now. I think Ethereum has opened up that dialogue. It doesn't come from that kind of same, very, very libertarian cyberpunk tradition, although a lot of those guys still say they're cyberpunks because it sounds cool. But that narrative is opening up, and it actually affects technical decisions. If you're hardcore about decentralization, then you're going to choose a particular technical infrastructure that's very dogmatic and ideological. And the most interesting people in this space, they don't necessarily come with that kind of dogma, because they're intellectually curious enough to be flexible and to think about what the end use cases are, how to adapt things, how to be practical. So it's really important that we have those diversity of opinions and use cases and views, because all things are social. All things involve the world in which we live in and how we live in it together and make it all work. So that's why we need to have these different kinds of views.
You topped your jail story.
Yeah.
Seriously, I feel really boring all of a sudden. What?
Well, it was nice talking to Ross, because I was like, oh, this is crazy libertarian, because I read all the New York Times article, but it was like, this guy deserves to be in jail. And then I talked to him, it's like, okay, he's a really smart guy, and I can actually have a debate with a hardcore libertarian about these issues. Yeah. So it helps to have those dialogues.
No, absolutely. Fully agree.
Just a quick thing. When I was listening to what you were saying, I was thinking to myself, has anyone ever seen the graphic? There's a graphic out there somewhere in the world where there's a picture of Vitalik, and this is supposed to represent the cultures of Bitcoin versus Ethereum. If you can find it, it's hilarious. It's a picture of Vitalik wearing a unicorn t-shirt with his cat bag. Very sweet. And then there's a picture of it's Bitcoin, and it's a guy who basically has a bandana over his face, and he's got an AK-47 basically pointed at you. I'm not saying that's exactly correct, but I thought that was actually a funny pictorial that I ran across ages ago. I'm sure it's somewhere.
You just kicked off a new tweet storm. No, okay.
Hey, I like both parties.
I know.
And with that, we're going to open it up to Q&A. So we have some mics kind of traveling around. So if anyone has any questions, please raise your hand. And then we also are taking questions from the live stream. So Danica and Fabian. Back there.
I guess while Fabian.
Sorry. Kelsey also come sit back up here for the Q&A.
Oh.
Hi, I'm Claire. I run a company in Columbus, Ohio. So this is a really intriguing conversation because when we raised money for my company, we went the traditional and funding route. So I'm curious, for an ICO, if they aren't purchasing shares or purchasing a part of the company, what are they actually purchasing, and how does a company actually pay back the investors?
Good question.
I can speak to that briefly. So basically, with Ethereum and ERC20 tokens, which is what mostly this is talking about, you're dealing with programmable money. So the answer is whatever you want. So you can program your token to represent value of some sort or utility to be able to access the platform, or membership, or governance rights, or basically anything you want it to do. So there isn't one standard type of token or standard way it represents utility or value. You can program it to be whatever you want. So there are tokens that function as registered securities. There are tokens that have been called utility tokens, or digital consumer goods, or consumer tokens, and each of them is structured differently to allow access to the buyer, or to allow the buyer to participate in upside from the company. It just depends. And when you're thinking about purchasing a token or participating in a token sale, definitely read the white paper and understand what the token does, because it can be really different token to token.
So I'm going to go slightly contrarian on the ICO thing, and the reason I'm going to do that is, and I think it's a wonderful innovation and an evolution in ultimately crowdfunding and capital raising. The reason I'm slightly contrarian is that we have a legal working group that is now 36 global law firms, and for the record, you've really you've not lived until you've been in a conference room with 35 attorneys. All of them screaming at you about whether or not something is a security. Yeah. And there is, you're kind of striking at the heart of the challenges around token offerings, and SEC chairman recently came out and said he's not seen an ICO offering that wasn't a security. And we're deeply involved in this, so I get the concept of utility tokens. I suspect that we'll start to see a framework or some recommendations for best practices around token offerings, because they don't want to stifle the innovation that it represents from a capital formation perspective. But to your point, read that white paper and be careful. There's a lot of, and I'd be interested in the rest of the panel's thoughts on it, there are a lot of tokens out there that are just really dangerous.
I'm sorry. The other thing is, because of that securities law question, as a U.S. person here, then it's a question of, do you need to be what's called an accredited investor in order to participate, meaning that you make a certain amount of money, over $200K a year, or $1 million in assets, excluding your house. Right. So then that becomes an issue. Like, are you actually eligible to participate as a U.S. person, under what conditions? Because if we assume in the U.S. now everything is by default a security, whether it is something else or not, then there's some bars and restrictions as to who can participate, which personally I think is very backwards minded.
Agreed.
Yeah.
And it's a rapidly evolving ecosystem, because it's not just the people issuing the ICOs now. When you look at how regulators have weighed in on this, if you're a lawyer advising, you're on notice. If you're in a consulting firm that says, hey, I can help you do your ICO and I'm going to make you millions of dollars, guess what? You're on notice too. So it's a rapidly evolving space, and it's a very important part of the evolution of all of this, but it's Wild West on steroids, I think is what I heard recently.
One cool source of information on that is the Brooklyn Project, which is a group of industry stakeholders, government officials, people that are interested in the conversation. It's also a Telegram group. It itself is working on a set of standards in advance of regulation that it's going to publish probably quite soon about how to continue to grow the token economy with reasonable consumer protections.
So in an ideal world, I'd hoped that we could develop a self-enforcing, self-governing token mechanism, but it's proven that we have lots of bad actors who've come into the space wanting to turn a quick buck or two or millions. And so there are scammers out there that have fleeced individuals of many, many dollars. And so, unfortunately, because of the Wild West nature of what's been going on since pretty much end of last year through, or part of last year through now, it's hard to tell the difference between a good business that has a product that has really the need for the money to grow versus the scammers that are out there who are just going to shut the website down as soon as the token sale is done. And until I think we have some more guidelines, and unfortunately I think, you know, it's going to be on the regulators to provide those guidelines now. I'm not saying that the community won't figure out ways to also have some level of filtering and
Should be
guidelines.
collaborative.
It should, but it's been clear that we've let, I mean, as a community, a lot of bad actors have come in and taken advantage of people, and that part I definitely find odious. So we either have to figure out a way to flush them out faster, or the government, or sorry, regulators will do that for us.
Yep. And the regulators aren't just talking about this. They issued something like 80 some odd subpoenas to ICO issuers, and I promise you more are coming.
Oh yeah, they're watching, they're involved, and I think the smartest thing you can do if you're ever considering doing an ICO, first and foremost, it's the hardest thing you will ever do on your mental, emotional, and physical health. Trust me. It is literally the most challenging thing I've ever gone through in my professional and personal life. You know, I probably made it sound easy when I said, yeah, 6 weeks, 15 million. We were talking about the need for marketers and communicators, which is why my co-founder and I were brought onto this project to really properly tell the story and be able to build a true brand and help explain how this business was going to grow and evolve. And really communicate the team and the people and the capabilities behind it, and showcase, you know, what they could do. But also, just one thing I want to say about an ICO is, like, you literally need to be able to be ready to spend about $1 million in legal counsel, finding the best legal counsel that you possibly can, who's going to explore every single avenue and treat it, even if you are a utility token, treating the laws like it's a security, because, you know, the regulators are coming. This is a very real situation that we're in, and in order to actually make the community better and sort of make the world of ICOs a better place, the people who do plan to do good work have a much higher responsibility and a spotlight on them to set an example for the rest of the world. So anybody, you know, going forward, great if you were in the early 2017 days of it being a little bit easier. But now I think it's really good that we're having all these conversations, and we have a lot of very official people that are getting involved with the process of ICOs, because it is challenging. It is you know, scary that all of that capital can be raised and perhaps just disappear because you don't have the same kind of you know, VC process. However, I also need to say on the flip side, there is that accountability to each and every person. As you were saying, you know, you're on notice, anybody that's involved in these, to all of the investors or participants in your ICO. So for instance, we had about 6,000 participants in our ICO. We have 6,000 people who are asking us about it every single day. So, you know, not every single one of them, but they're very active 24/7 on the Telegram channel. You know, they require regular updates. There's a lot of accountability because the community is so strong. So instead of just having, you know, a few VCs knocking on your door once a quarter, you're talking, you know, unsophisticated investors who are asking every day when they'll see return, which I think comes back to the first answer of your question. The ICO promise, especially in the utility side of things, the difference between the utility and a security, which we've sort of touched on, is that a utility should be used within the platform as an actual currency and have a purpose, a true purpose, to not just be speculative for the performance of the team or the business. So the utility should have a function within the platform and the ecosystem to actually validate, you know, could you replace this with Ethereum or Bitcoin? If the answer is yes, then you don't need a token. Well, like, what is the true function of it? And we've, you know, been through this conversation lots of times, which is why I touched on that earlier. But it is extremely important, and that regardless, like I said, treat it with all of the securities laws, and the investors, essentially what they're buying is the hope that it will go up when the volume increases. So when you issue tokens, you only issue a certain amount. We issued 1 billion tokens. And just like real estate in Manhattan, you could buy an apartment in Manhattan and assume it's probably going to go up in value over time because there's only so much space on the island. So in itself, that's a utility investment. Tokens have to be sort of thought of in the same way that can they actually be used on the day-to-day, but will they go up over time because supply and demand, there's a finite amount. That's what people are looking for in terms of return. So you just want to essentially up token volume.
But also people buy tokens because they want to use the platforms, not just because of limited supply.
Right. We're talking ICO though, right? Like for a lot of people, they're doing it from a...
Well, that's why there's securities, because the SEC says it's
exactly.
the expectation of profit.
Yeah.
But when I was listening to a lot of these podcasts about how do you value utility, so I think all utility tokens, if they're going to be a utility function, it's a payment function. Mm-hmm. And so one of the things that was discussed is that actually if you have high usage of your platform, that token velocity, the pace at which, the speed at which that token moves through that system is really fast, which in theory means that that token actually doesn't appreciate, because the function of that token is to just be sort of the oil, the grease. So it has a very different function then in that case than being like equity, which is somehow to capture the value and the growth of your ecosystem. So you have to know where you're investing in. Like what is in those cases, yes, like if I were the SEC, I'd be like, okay, well then that's fine. That's a utility token as a payment function. Maybe do your KYC. It's not for equity, but then you got the reality where people are buying it because of expectations of profits.
Yeah, are you buying it to use the platform, or are you buying it because you think you're going to make money on it?
And most people will say
And this is why
Well,
it's very messy right now. So buyers beware.
I know 36 law firms that are driving me crazy if you want a recommendation.
But I mean, the other part is that Ethereum and Ether, which is kind of the beyond Bitcoin token, a lot of people who think that is going to be valuable or is valuable think that because they believe that the platform is useful. And there are people that have compared Bitcoin to gold and Ether to oil. I don't know whether that really holds up by all comparisons, but a lot of people who speak about the Ethereum network speak about Ether as gas, because you actually have to spend it to power applications that run on the network. So there's a correlation people imagine between how useful the Ethereum network is and the value of the Ether token.
And the fundamental use of the applications that are built on top of it. You can look at that valuation model for it.
Because you're going to need that in order to run them.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, Faven, I believe you have a question in the back.
So let me thank you guys for your contributions. I know an hour is a very short amount of time to cover the breadth of this new industry or economy. You actually covered a lot of what I was going to ask right there, so I'll make it 2 very concise questions. Do you think that a lot of the increased regulation scrutiny on ICOs is going to result in delisting and reissue of security tokens? Because I think in a lot of cases the utility token is hard to sell. And then do you think that we're going to get additional guidance on how this asset class and the exchange of tokens is going to be taxed? Because right now it's so convoluted, and with the close of the loophole or perceived loophole of like kind with the new tax bill, all of a sudden, an exchange you may make with very high value tokens, or what is perceived as high value tokens today, could crash, and then at the end of the year you find that you owe a massive tax bill on assets that you hold that are near worthless at that point.
So I'll kick off just real quickly. I'll take the second part of that question first, if that's okay. One of the partnerships that we have at the WSBA is with AICPA, and really gathering that kind of accounting, taxation, and legal aspects of what are the tax implications for these tokens as they evolve? What the heck are they as they evolve? I think what we're really trying to drive is industry, I don't want to call it SRO, but really industry-driven perspective and recommendations on the best way to approach this. And full disclosure, like so many people on this stage, we also do speak to regulators on a fairly regular basis. And I know the Brooklyn organization, and there's several others, looking at recommended best practices. We'll be doing likewise to the SEC, to the CFTC in Europe as well. So I think your question about delisting, I think the actions of regulators have put a pause on a lot of people, and I think in several instances they were asked to voluntarily stop. You'll probably see more of that until there's more clarity. Regulators are still trying to mount the education curve as well.
So just to add to that, you know, and some of the things that are really important for us over at GBVC as well, which is talking to the regulators around the world on a regular basis. And here's the thing. They all have different views. They all have different levels of education and understanding of this space. And what we're seeing in the US is not what we're necessarily seeing in Singapore or Hong Kong or the UK or Europe or Dubai. And so, unfortunately, we have a situation that I like to call jurisdictional arbitrage or regulatory arbitrage. And there are definitely, it's going to continue, most likely. I think there will be a time where eventually some of the big blocks, economic blocks, will try to come together, and the regulators may try to have some sort of common, cohesive, you know, laws or guidance. I don't know what you want to call it. But I mean, look, the tax situation is also a mess. You mentioned that nasty word tax, so I'm going to say it. It's a big problem right now, and people are going to have do have massive crypto tax bills that they have to deal with right now as we speak. But then there's a whole nother level of other tokens that are out there, and what do you do next year? Hopefully, there will be some great companies that will help with the reporting and the tracking of that. I think they're coming up, actually. There's a few. But look, I think depending on where you are, if you sit in the US, it's pretty clear. The regulators are at full attention now, including IRS, SEC, CFTC, and they all have different views. And by the way, further complicating, it's state by state, they're passing their own laws or bills, and we'll see how that goes.
Wyoming, Arizona, yeah.
That's right.
So some cool stuff going on in the States. Some different things going on in different areas. I guess the other thing I'd add to that is that in addition to the conversations that we're having with regulators and that the space is having with regulators, we take a software focus. So we're building tools that token companies and blockchain-based businesses can use to hold themselves to really high standards. So we have an accounting tool called Balance that's going to enable people that have launched tokens to follow really high-quality accounting practices. We have a governance tool to plug into token and blockchain-based ecosystems. So there's also a software side. There's a whole side of blockchain that's actually RegTech, so helping regulators use the blockchain themselves to help them do their jobs better. And a lot of the properties of blockchains, like transparency, like the ease of tracking the way that finances move from different accounts, is actually really beneficial for regulators in a lot of contexts. So that's something that we're thinking about and building.
To add on to that, a friend of mine and I have been talking a lot about the term technical guarantees. So if we can use blockchain and empower them and say, well, we can actually make all these rules compliant, or we use these technologies so that it has a functional equivalence to what the law requires. So, for example, if you have a exempt security under, say, Reg D, you're not supposed to resell or retrade that for about a year period under Rule 144. So you could imagine having a smart contract whereby that gets encoded into the whole ICO process, so that it says, okay, are you accredited? Check. So there's a identity portion, which it underpins a lot of the work in the blockchain space, and then you can have those functionalities that, okay, you're not allowed to trade on that token. The other, on the practical side, I think there's a lot of the exchanges or the platforms they're not actually ready or licensed to actually trade these securitized or tokenized securities, I suppose that's the right term. So there's a practical effect besides the legal rules. So, I mean, there's a lot of stuff happening in the space. I mean, I've heard also some folks petitioning regulators to say, okay, there should be some kind of remediation process for existing utility tokens that weren't registered or issued under an exemption, for them to remediate that process so that we don't have to entirely throw them out or get those people in trouble, but there's a process of making sure now they're compliant. So there's a lot of stuff happening in the space, and
and there needs to be more tools to do that.
Yeah.
To your point about
Yeah.
you're basically tying into identity and KYC.
yeah,
ML.
exactly.
If I can add one thing, I'd say just like you go to your doctor to get a prescription, go to your accountant or your lawyer for specific advice that works for you in whatever country you happen to be in. In Canada, it's different from province to province, very different from what's happening in the U.S. And you just have to be a good citizen, be a good person, and play by the rules. And then this whole space can grow and regulation can get better.
We wanted to ask one question from the live stream. Sarah Weinheimer wants to know, please offer several IRL applications of the blockchain away from cryptocurrency that would help illustrate its power and potential.
You want to start?
Well, that kind of falls right into what I'm focusing on, actually. So I'll give two plugs very quickly. So I'm focusing on social good projects, blockchain being used for social good. So there are two projects and companies that we're launching. One out of London is actually focusing on helping rural farmers in physical commodities, mainly in developing nations, mobile front end, blockchain back end, basically providing price transparency, asset registry, identity that allows them then to have pricing power over what they're selling. So imagine a world where you're selling coffee and cocoa and you're basically you're getting only a tiny fraction of the end user cost. Most people don't realize, but if you look deep down at the supply chain of physical commodities, there's a lot of dodgy business going on. And there's a reason why there are middle people who want to keep it not transparent. And so we've got one company that's focusing on the farmer specifically, but helping to shed some light on that. And the other one is giving financial access and removing business frictions for independent artists. When we say independent artists, we have a very wide definition of that, but that's really focusing on how do you help someone who's a musician. Believe it or not, we're talking to Imogen as well, so it's all good.
She's so great.
But it's an LA-based company focusing on film, TV, and music to start. But imagine a world where if you're not part of the Hollywood machine, how do you get access to capital? How do you deal with all those legal documents if you don't have access to fancy lawyers? How do you find people? Like, there's just a number of business frictions that we'll be looking to looking to remove for those people.
So I think that supply chain is probably probably one of the better use cases for blockchain out there, and the use case more rapidly going to production and fruition. I think identity as well. So a bit selfishly, but I advise a company called BankQ that's looking at leveraging blockchain for identity for displaced persons and refugees, because the biggest challenge for them is that they don't have economic identity. In the US, I think the number is something on the order of 68 million people are either unbanked or underbanked. So you begin to look at, and these are live, real-world solutions being pushed to market now. I think the food supply chain is a nightmare, and I think if people understood where their food is coming from, your hair would fall out. But there are solutions that are out there now that are tracking the organic provenance of certain foods, and there's certain companies, I know you're advising some in Provenance and Ripe.io and some others. I think those are the use cases that are live or going live quickly that will have the most impact.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with that. Supply chain is a really great use case. We have a supply chain project called Viant that has done a project with the World Wildlife Fund to track the provenance of tuna from where it's caught on the docks to the supermarket where you buy it. So you know that the tuna wasn't farmed illegally, that you know that it was, it came through fair trade practices, that it has all the guarantees that a consumer would want to see or that a regulator would want to know about it. And that's something kind of more on the impact side, working with an impact group. But this also applies to, GlaxoSmithKline. This also applies to, auto. This applies to pharma. It applies to everything. Energy. Everything that's moving something from one place to another would benefit, or moving things through different entities' custody would benefit from a blockchain supply chain solution. Our artist kind of rights management, so that's definitely a category. Identity, we have a project called Ujo. There are a bunch of different, Ujo is the music rights, and then Uport is our identity project, but there are a bunch of interesting, on the Bitcoin blockchain, Civic, there are a bunch of really interesting projects in those spaces.
And just to add one more thing, I actually think blockchain for good projects is where I actually do see the few women who are in blockchain. There's a lot of women actually starting their own companies who are running things and, you know, engineers, et cetera, in that space. And I actually think that's great because as much as it's nice for us to make money off of crypto or, you know, get rich off of crypto, it's actually the stuff that people are building to solve real world problems that actually end up mattering, I think, in the long run.
So my project is Exone, where we are building a blockchain for social impact. So what we're building is a set of tools and protocols that allow any project to cost effectively collect and verify and evaluate the data, their impact data. So what are your outcomes? Are you reaching your intended beneficiaries? And you can tokenize that impact data into a digital asset. So when you think about results-based finance or pay for success. So this would be the mechanism to do it using blockchain and crypto. And the bigger vision is how do we create an economy whereby we actually do value the things that are good for us, that we create value around our values, right? So currently our economy doesn't do that because we don't actually correctly price negative externalities or positive externalities that get diffused as a public good. So what's really interesting is that with these new set of tools, if we can start isolating those different values, and so we can reward people, either you can tax people for the negative externalities, or you can reward people for not creating those negative externalities, or reward them for a portion of the public good that they're contributing to. And so I think this is a really fascinating kind of experiment in terms of how blockchain can move that conversation, that dialogue. And we've got a couple of really, really cool use cases. So an existing one is called Amply. That tokenizes preschool attendance records in South Africa, because as a preschool operator, you can then submit those proof of attendance for subsidies from the Western Cape government. And so this was UNICEF Innovation Fund's first blockchain investment. We've been running this project since November 2016, and so to date we've tokenized more than 55,000 preschool attendance records across 50 plus preschool centers in South Africa. So that's an example of creating an accountability trail around, you know, what the government is paying for. Did the kids go to school? Identity, of course, underpins everything you do in the space. Because you can't have provenance, you can't make claims without knowing who's making the claims, who's signing off on those claims. And another project that we're working on now is with the Gold Standard Foundation, which is a carbon credits standards body and carbon credits issuer. And so they come up with a methodology that says these number of inputs equals Y number of carbon credits that we can issue with our name on it, and we oversee that process. And that process is very, very analog and very expensive and time consuming. So that limits the number of projects that they can certify. And so they've been working with us to see how we can digitize that entire process so that you use something called smart contracts to encode those methodologies and those metrics. And outcomes of the smart contract, instead of a carbon credit, it's a carbon token. So it's a natively digital asset that's way more data rich than a carbon credit, which is just a serial number. And it doesn't provide the depth of information about where that project came from, what it did, who it benefited, and capturing all the wonderful co-benefits of carbon reduction. So this is a project that we're working on for a clean burning cook stove in India. So we're super excited about that. And the last thing I want to highlight is a pilot project we're going to do with UBS Optimus Foundation, which is funded by UBS Bank, and they are a frequent investor in something called social impact bonds or development impact bonds. So the idea of an impact bond is that you have private investors that will invest the working capital to run an innovative new program, and if and only if predefined outcome metrics are met, you have a payer called an outcomes payer. Usually it's a government, it could be a big foundation that will then repay those private investors a return on their capital. So it's all contingent on achieving social targets and outcome targets. And again, that whole evaluation and monitoring process is very expensive, and you're involving multiple stakeholders and parties that can't always communicate with each other. So blockchain provides a shared data layer across parties that may not necessarily always trust each other. So blockchain creates that trusted data layer, that shared data layer. And again, through the use of smart contracts, we can start automating those contractual terms. So we have verified cryptographically signed proof that these outcome metrics were met, and now we can trigger the payments for that, or at least provide a receipt saying you're eligible for payment. And so you can start imagining how we can take that to the next level. So let's start tokenizing these social impact bonds so that it doesn't have to be in the realm of institutional investors or big foundations. What if you and I could invest in impact bonds, because this is something we believe in? So now you're looking at a new asset class whereby impact investing is an actual asset class that people do want to participate in. So these are kind of the possibilities that I think are really exciting with blockchain.
I'm going to sneak one in too this is not nearly as cool as what you were saying, but big companies and corporations, and terrible because it's like anti everything we're talking about, but they're using their own private blockchains, which is really fascinating too. When a big bank in Canada, Scotiabank, just invested $2 billion in developing their own blockchain, and they are super anti-cryptocurrency, so it's really interesting to see people using blockchain for everything against what all these beautiful things we were just talking about.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much, and let's give a round of applause to our panel and our speakers.